The inspection had been going for 40 minutes. Senior drill instructor Vorik moved down the line of new cadets with the unhurried certainty of a predator that has never once needed to hurry. He was Greshary, 7 feet of gray-furred, amber-eyed apex evolution, a species that had held galactic military dominance for 3 centuries before humanity had even invented gunpowder. His kind called themselves war wolves, though not out of vanity. It was simply the most accurate translation. The Academy of the Galactic Compact trained cadets from 43 species. Every cycle brought fresh meat. Every cycle, Vorik broke them down and rebuilt them into something worth keeping. He moved with mechanical precision, pausing at each cadet, reading them the way a surgeon reads a body for fault lines. Where they would break. How soon? The Thurvian in Bay 3 was sweating through her scales. Good. Fear kept cadets alive and training. The 2 Pellin brothers at Bay 7 were standing too close together, seeking pack comfort. He filed it away. The Selhari girl at Bay 9 had her chin raised 2 degrees too high. Pride. The most expensive weakness in a soldier. He noted. He catalogued. He moved on. Then he reached Bay 12. He stopped. The human stood at attention the way all humans stood at attention, which was to say, technically correctly, but with something underneath that Vorik had never quite been able to name in 40 years of instructing. Some current running below the surface. Some banked furnace that proper military posture was supposed to contain, but never quite did. Cadet Mara Okafor, 23 years old by the human calendar. Female, 167 centimeters, 61 kilograms. She looked, by any objective standard, like the least threatening organism in the room. Vorik had learned, over 4 decades, never to trust objective standards where humans were concerned. He circled her slowly. She did not track him with her eyes. Good discipline. But he could see the fine hair on the back of her neck rise as he moved behind her. Threat awareness. Her body knew where he was at every moment without being told to care. He stopped in front of her and sat. This was not standard procedure. Vorik had never, in 40 years, sat in front of a cadet during inspection. It was something the Greshary did within their own kind, a deliberate behavioral signal, a posture that said, I am studying you because you are worth studying. The room went very still. The other cadets, the ones with enough social awareness to notice, shifted almost imperceptibly. Even raw recruits from species that had never encountered Greshary body language seemed to understand, on some instinctual level, that something unusual was happening. Vorik met Okafor's eyes. She met his. Most species looked away within 4 seconds. This was not cowardice. It was simple biology. The Greshary stare triggered prey response in the vast majority of warm-blooded organisms, and even the ones who fought through it usually blinked or angled their gaze a fraction to the side. A polite retreat. Okafor did not blink. She did not retreat. She held his gaze with dark brown eyes that were, he realized, doing something rather extraordinary. They were studying him back. Not in defiance. Not in the performative aggression that young males of martial species sometimes attempted. She was genuinely, calmly, scientifically looking at him, cataloging him the way he had been cataloging her. 8 seconds passed. Vorik rumbled, low in his chest. The sound was not a growl. It was something his species made involuntarily when encountering something unexpected. A cognitive recalibration. A mental note, written in sound. He spoke, his translator rendering Greshary gutturals into compact standard. You've been in a fight. It was not a question. He could read the history in her body, the slight asymmetry in the way she held her left shoulder, an old break healed perhaps 2 degrees off true, the scar tissue along the outer edge of her right hand, the kind that came from striking bone with an unloved fist, the particular density of muscle across her upper back that developed not in people who exercised for fitness, but in people who had, at some point, needed to physically stop something from happening. Yes, sir, Okafor said. Her voice was level. Multiple occasions. Yes, sir. How many? She didn't hesitate. Enough to have opinions about it, sir. Another rumble. Deeper this time. Behind him, he was dimly aware of the other cadets not moving, not breathing too loudly, doing the collective organism thing that social species did when they sensed a dominant creature was focused elsewhere. Stillness is camouflage. Your intake file, Vorik said, list your previous occupation as emergency search and rescue. Before that, You were enrolled in a university studying. He paused, recalling it precisely. Xenobiological ecology. Yes, sir. You left academia to pull injured people out of collapsed structures. The field work was better, sir. And before that, he had read the full file. He wanted to hear her say it. Before that, I grew up in a city with a high resource competition index, sir. A slight pause, which is a polite way of saying it was poor and occasionally violent. And I learned early that the people who waited for someone else to handle problems usually didn't like how problems got handled. Vorik was quiet for a moment. In the intake documentation, the Compact's psychological assessment team had flagged Okafor with 3 separate notations. The first read, elevated aggression response threshold, subject demonstrates unusual calm under simulated threat conditions. The second read, anomalous leadership emergence pattern, subject consistently assumes organizational role in group scenarios without apparent intent or awareness. The third, written by a senior evaluator who had clearly been struggling to articulate something, simply read, Pack Alpha Dynamics, see attached. He had seen the attached. It described, in careful clinical language, something Vorik had observed himself in the handful of humans who passed through the academy each cycle. Humans were not, technically, pack animals. They were something stranger, facultative pack animals. They could function alone. They could integrate into existing hierarchies. But under certain conditions, stress, shared adversity, extended proximity, they did something that no behavioral model fully predicted. They built packs out of whatever was available. Species that had never coexisted. Organisms with incompatible social architectures. Cadets who had arrived as strangers. Humans, the documentation suggested, seemed constitutionally unable to not find the load-bearing members of any group and begin, quietly, and without apparent strategy, organizing around them. The attachment had included a note from a xenopsychologist who had spent 30 years studying human behavior. We believe this trait is a relic of an environment where humans could not reliably predict which threats they would face or what coalition partners would be available. They evolved to build functional social structures out of whatever was present. The troubling implication is that there may be no social environment, however alien, in which a sufficiently motivated human cannot eventually find traction. Vorik had thought about that note for 3 days. He thought about it now, looking at Mara Okafor, who had arrived at the academy 6 hours ago and had, according to the observation logs, already learned the names of every cadet in her barracks block, helped a Selhari cadet locate her missing kit bag, mediated a noise dispute between 2 Pelin brothers, and spent 40 minutes discussing load-bearing structural theory with the academy's Thurvian engineering cadet over what was supposed to be a silent dinner. Without, the log noted, appearing to try. Pack Alpha of trouble, Vorik said. Okafor blinked. The first time she had blinked since he sat down. Sir, it is what we call cadets like you. He rose from his seated position, and something in the air pressure of the room seemed to shift. Not an insult. Not a compliment. An observation. You are the kind of creature that other creatures organize around. Under normal circumstances, this would make my job somewhat more complicated. And under abnormal circumstances, sir? He looked at her for one more long moment. Under abnormal circumstances, Vorik said, it is the only reason any of us survive them. He moved on down the line. Behind him, he did not see Okafor's expression change. He didn't need to. He had been doing this for 40 years. He knew what happened in the chest of a young soldier when they were told, for the first time, that the thing that had always made them difficult was also the thing that made them necessary. He knew, too, what happened to the cadets around them when they realized they were standing next to it. By evening mess, Okafor would have 3 cadets sitting with her who hadn't known her name at breakfast. By the end of the first week, she would have 7. By graduation, Vorik suspected, she would have an entire unit that would follow her into a collapsing star if she told them there was something worth reaching on the other side. He'd seen it before. Once per generation, if they were lucky. He did not slow his pace. He did not look back. But deep in his chest, quieter than a rumble and older than language, something that the Greshary had no word for, because they had never needed one, stirred in something like recognition, in something like respect. Humanity. They show up in your academy for the first time, and somehow you end up feeling like the one being evaluated.